Hey everybody, it's Mark Schulz here, and we are back at the top of the hour, right on time for our next session of the 2020 Digital Aircraft Recovery in Aviation Virtual Summit. Hey Larry, welcome back.
Hey Mark, you're just right on schedule today. Fantastic.
Perfect. All right. Looks like we got a special guest sandwiched in between us here, Jim Boccarossa, and he is the CEO of ProvenAir. Jim, give us a quick snippet. What does your company do?
So Mark and Larry, ProvenAir is a software company that has built a system to analyze aircraft records and dynamically generate back-to-birth trace histories for life-limited parts.
That's great. Listen, I got to tell you, Jim, about 2 or 3 or 4 months ago, I can't remember when it was, we did an early session with you when we were doing some of these recovery and aviation broadcasts. And after the broadcast, I had people around the world that were contacting me and asking me about your business, all right? And so I'm just telling that to everybody right now because I think this is going to be a great session. And so for those of you that are watching out there, you're going to want to stay on here because we got some really interesting information. These guys are really doing some things that are making a difference with respect to parts and landing gear, and you're going to want to see this. So listen, let me just quickly make some administrative remarks briefly. Listen, this broadcast is being broadcast on LinkedIn, and it's on LinkedIn events. And I wanted to point out to you that up on the top of the LinkedIn event, there's actually a link that says join here, I think is what it says. And what you want to do is you want to click that, and it'll take you over to our offsite platform called live.recoveryinaviation.com. And the reason I'm driving you over there is because there is an agenda there, and you'll be able to see the speakers that are left here today. We still have some speakers left for today. And it also gives you a platform in which you can make comments, and we will actually be able to answer some questions as a result of that. So just that one thing, I just wanted to point that out. And then the other thing I wanted to say is to help us out and get the word out, and we want everybody to share this broadcast. So please help us out on all the platforms that you're on and share this stream so that we can get the word out, because we want everybody to join us in this quest for recovery in aviation. Okay, those are my administrative remarks. Now we're going to get into the good stuff. Okay, Jim?
We're ready.
All right, okay. Larry and Jim, hey, listen, I want to go back to you, Jim, and I want to say, can you just tell us, first of all, where are you located today?
We are in beautiful, sunny Chicago, and we only get a few months a year to say that. So I'm going to say it's beautiful.
Okay, great, good. All right, that's very good. Now, can you tell me a little bit about your background? I know you're the CEO of ProvenAir, and I just want for people out there to know a little bit about yourself and your background, to give us a little bit of context for the discussion that we're going to have here today.
Okay, so I am relatively new to the aviation industry, right? I'm talking to a couple of veterans here, and Larry spent 40 years at Boeing, so I'm relatively new in that I've got 6 years in the aviation industry. But prior to that, I had experience in the technology world, primarily in business-to-business enterprise technology solutions in the startup world. So I've been running startups for about 17 years now. I've been involved with tech startups for 17 years. How I made the transition to aviation was actually through my wife, who she has 20 years experience in the aviation world, where she is the founder of a company called Aerospace Unlimited. And I joined with her about 6 years ago. And one of the things we found, because that company specializes in aftermarket redistribution of landing gear, wheels, and brakes, one of the biggest issues we saw was the paperwork required to buy, sell, trade landing gear. And me, with my technology background, it was all being done manually, and I thought, this is crazy. So I've got to start a software company to solve this problem in the industry. Yeah. And that's how I got here.
Yeah, very good. Hey, and listen, it's actually a really nice thing that we have people that come in from outside the industry, from the technology business, because, Larry and I obviously have seen that the aviation industry lags behind in a lot of areas. And so it's actually really a good thing to infuse some outside ideas and technology into the aviation industry to help things move forward. So that does not position you in a bad spot. That positions you in a good spot. All right.
Well, I'm glad you spun it that way. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, it's not a spin. It's the truth. All right. And so listen, let's start the session out like we have with many of the others. And we'd like to have a little bit of a discussion about the industry And you know, a lot of people have already talked about what's happening in the industry, and so we don't need to get into all the details of what's happening in the U.S. But what we want to do is we want to know how the impact in the industry has affected your business. And then we're going to drive down into business problems and what's driven you to actually do what you're doing right now. But let's start by just having a discussion. Is it you're a software developer surrounding landing gear and records right now. How have the changes in the industry impacted what you're doing?
Well, the first thing is that most of our customers view software as a capital expenditure. And so given the current situation, most of your airlines, MROs, lessors, even other aircraft parts suppliers have put a big decline on capital expenditure. So that's really put a strain on some of our business because we're lumped in there in that category. So I'd say that's the biggest issue for us. But on a positive note, what it's also done is it's really emphasized the need for this digital transformation to take place in the industry, because now all of a sudden the airlines or MROs or lessors, a lot of their folks are working remote or they're being furloughed, right? So they're maybe only working 2 or 3 weeks an entire month. So they still have the same amount of work to do. They're not there yet. Now they're also working remote, okay? And the systems that they had were not designed to handle that, right? And as you said, Mark, the aviation industry really needs to start embracing technology in this digital revolution. They're just not there yet. But the good thing is, positive of this whole situation is that it's going to force them to do it right now. And we're perfectly positioned to help.
Yep. And Larry, I want to jump this back to you for a minute. You know, you've been around maintenance and maintenance paperwork and things for many years. You've been involved in some digitization efforts to bring, digital out there. But, what's your assessment of the industry today as far as paper out there today? Is there a lot of paper out there or not?
Well, Mark and Jim, I sort of lived the landing gear world for about 5 years at Boeing when I was in charge of the customer support group responsible for landing gear. It's the compliance and paperwork nightmare, and it has been for a long time. It still is today. That's not really unique to landing gear or life limited parts, but for life limited parts in particular, keeping track of all the paperwork and the compliance and what's been done to what part and where it's gone and those hours and cycles, it's just really hard. And I know if you lose 1 or 2 records, you're going to probably pay for Jim's software.
We're going to save that money, Larry.
Yeah, right.
Save
Yeah, exactly.
So
like you say, Mark, it's for airframe. It's certainly the paper is primarily still the way people keep track of records, and that's not the way to do it. But for life limited parts, it's just it notches the urgency and the need up another level.
Yeah, we see stacks and stacks of paper that are really out there. And so, Jim, I don't want to quite yet go into the discussion of the digital part yet. I want to kind of stick back with the discussion of the current situation. But, what are you seeing as far as paper out there is concerned? How much of what you get on landing gear is basically paper today?
Almost 100%.
Wow.
And here's what I would say is that, and I know we're not getting into this digital discussion, but I think the aviation industry, and you mentioned I come from the outside world, I come from the technology space. I started my career out as a software developer. So that's my background. When I entered the aviation space, all of a sudden people say, oh yeah, I have all my records digital. I said, well, what do you mean you have it digital? Well, we've scanned them all in and we have JPEGs of it and I can email them to you. Well, wait a second. Okay, that's not digital, right? But the aviation world has embraced that as being digital. What you've solved, the problem that you've solved is you no longer have to put those physical copies in a box and put it in the mail and I get it 3 days later. Now you can attach it to an email and I get it instantaneously. That's the problem you've solved. You've not digitized the information just because it's an image now. So
okay, well, but Jim, let's clarify.
It's still that.
Yeah, let's clarify that real quick. So I just want to say one thing is that technically that's digital, okay? But But
you're an aviation guy. See?
well, no. I'm just saying technically it's digital, but the problem is it's not intelligent, right? Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. And so I think we have a problem with people really understanding the value of having intelligent digital. Okay.
Absolutely.
Larry and I run around.
That's a good way to put it. I think our friend Thanos would call it digital paper.
Yeah, exactly. In the last session, Thanos called it digital paper. All right. Yeah. And so, we're basically faced with a situation where, just let me ask you this, Jim. Do you think people really understand the problem with the approach that they have today? All right. I mean,
no, I just don't think they have the background to solve it. Right. Okay. In the aviation industry, you have literally rocket scientists, right? You have PhDs in aerospace engineering. Right? So they know parts, they know metallurgy, they know mechanics. They don't understand software development. And that's really what you need.
Okay. All right.
To solve these problems.
Now, before we go on to start talking about the solutions yet, I still want to stay with the industry and the business problems. All right. And so, just for a minute, I want to ask you is that, are you seeing an increase in paperwork, a decrease, with what's happening right now? Are you seeing more landing gear, less landing gear? What's really happening to your business environment as a result of all the aircraft being on the ground and, lower levels of flying? And, what's really happening? What's the impact to your business as a result of that?
So as I mentioned before, the capital expenditures from our customers have gone down. However, the discussions now have gone up because now our clients are embracing, we've got to do something different. Right? If anything, COVID has shined a light on the antiquated processes of the way they were doing things. Right? And so that's really helped us. We've had a lot more discussions. We've had a lot more demonstrations. We've had a lot more interest from our customers asking, hey, I've heard about this. Tell me more. Teach me. I want to learn about how I can improve my business. So that's actually been very positive for us.
Hey, Jim, are your customers airlines or MROs or landing gear shops, or who's your primary customer?
Yes.
Okay.
So our customers, we have a U.S. airline using the system. We have a very large U.S. MRO using the system. We have a parts supplier using the system.
Okay.
We have multiple lessors using the system. So it's really a gamut in the space.
Yeah, I guess I could see the value prop across that customer base that you just described. That's cool.
That's right. Each one of them looks at it slightly differently, where they're getting the value. So the airlines are looking at it from a compliance perspective, as you were talking about. The parts suppliers are looking at it from a speed of acquisition and a speed of sales perspective. The lessors are looking at it from a, how do I reduce concessions when I try to release this? Or how do I validate the material that my operators are putting on my aircraft? And from the MRO perspective, they're looking at, how do I increase the quality of my trace review, because I'm putting my 8130 on this. So I really want to go through that. So each one of them has a different value.
Yeah, just one little editorial comment, Mark, and you probably know this. I was in the software business for a while as well, and whenever we sold the software to a leasing companies are bankers, right? That's what they do. They're bankers. So if you were able to sell software to a leasing company, it had value. It had quantifiable value. Just editorial comment.
So I wanted to take a look now at a couple of things. Jim, you've mentioned a few times back to birth, traceability, and I think that's an important concept. And I want to make sure that people that are watching really understand what you mean by that. And there's been a couple of other technical jargons that you've thrown around that I'll come back around to and ask for clarification. But could you just explain, what you really mean by back to birth traceability? Because I think it's key to the problem that you're solving.
So back to birth traceability really applies to parts that have a life limit, so life limited parts. And what do we mean by life limited part? What that means is it's a part that has a cycle life limit, right? Or a time, hard time, or calendar time life limit, whatever the limit is, built and designed by the engineers, okay? And what back to birth trace does is it validates that that life limited part is compliant with that requirement. Okay. Now, the thing with back to birth trace, and we'll talk about landing gear, but really any of your major assets on that aircraft, engines, APUs, safety equipment, they also have not only a complete life limit, but they also have a maintenance interval limit. And so what you want to do is ensure that the part you're going to repair or put back on your aircraft has complied with all of those safety requirements. And back to birth trace basically is a provenance or the history of that part so that you know all the cycles, all the maintenance has been accounted for.
So, Jim, I know records are really important, but let me just ask this. I don't want to be cavalier, but really, how often is it really a problem? I mean, you know, aren't records usually in pretty good order?
So I have a fun statistic that I've shared with a number of folks. I'll let you guys guess here. We've analyzed through our system over 800 sets of landing gear. And these sets have gone through some of the top MROs. They've come from some of the most reputable airlines in the world. I'll let you guys guess how many of them had perfect records.
Of the 800, I'm going to say maybe 20.
Mark, what's your guess?
200.
Zero. The correct answer is zero. None of them. None of them. Right? Because you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of pages with hundreds of part numbers, hundreds of serial numbers, hundreds of cycles, you know, cycle since new, cycle since overhaul, all of this data, right, that can't possibly be reviewed manually when these gears are moved between aircraft, when they've gone through maintenance, when you've put different parts that were not original to that leg, when the plane was on lease to one operator and now it's on lease to another operator, and everything is being tracked manually, right, when it changes. And so we haven't found one yet. And we've done analysis, you know, when our customers want to test out the system, they say, oh, well, here's our paperwork. Okay. I know it's 2009 pages and you had 20 records people at your company look through it. It was really good. We only found 3 mistakes, right? But it still happens every time.
Yeah.
Hey,
Humanly impossible.
let me ask us a follow-up question where Mark was going. So I would just say, so what? So what? The records aren't right. I mean, what's the consequence of not having the records?
Depends on how severe that mistake is. Okay. Is it a transposition of a serial number where it was supposed to be 23 and it's 32? Okay, that was a typo. Okay, it's probably not a huge issue. But what if they forgot the 2 in front of my cycle limit, and instead of having 23,000 cycles on my gear or engine or whatever, now it says I only have 3,000, and then that air gets propagated throughout because the next operator takes those cycles. Now you could be facing a real safety concern that you assume your life limited part only has 3,000 cycles when it really had 23,000 cycles.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to be up in the air when that part potentially fails. So there are 2 concerns there. And then the final piece is the commercial aspect of that life limited part, that a lot of the requirements for full back to birth traceability has stemmed from the commercial side of the world, where they want to ensure they have everything so they can either lease that aircraft to another operator, or they can sell that part to an operator or use it during a repair, or even trade with other suppliers. So there's a commercial aspect as well.
I guess I would also add, if it's a systematic or issue with the records, you could be fined as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Every instance
for compliance.
Yeah, every instance. Jim, I always wanted to tell our viewers I didn't want to be playing dumb, but you and I have had this discussion before, and I know exactly the value of it, and that's why I brought the question up. Okay, but the reason I did it is because it's just so shocking and surprising that that records are really, not in order. And records are extremely important because for compliance reasons and for safety reasons and for fines and all sorts of reasons why. I mean, that's such an important aspect of maintaining an airworthy part, is maintaining good records. And it's really important. So the subject you're talking about is right, very, very important, Jim.
That's right. And I also feel like, to kind of go into the theme of recovery in aviation, right, is that we cannot afford at this point in the industry to have any failure of any part. Okay. People are already a little nervous to get back on aircraft, right, because of the coronavirus. What would happen to the industry if at LAX a passenger plane's landing gear collapses and the engine catches on fire because of a miscalculation in the maintenance records of a trunnion pin or something that snaps, or whatever, that could be catastrophic for the industry, right? So I think to look at how do we recover, we actually have to have better quality in it, even, and that stems first part is records.
Well, so as we begin to look at, what you're doing and the records that you have, I've been asking people all the time to talk to us about, what kind of revenue impacts can we make? What kind of cost impacts can we make? Cost reductions and revenue increases. And, I definitely see places where both of those things, can really happen. And so I wanted to just for a minute explore a little bit further. Okay, so you get a bunch of paper records on a pallet and you get an aircraft in. Let me just ask for clarification. Do you do just narrow body gear, or do you do wide body gear, or?
The system is any LLP. Right now, in our current version of ProvenAir, it works only on landing gear. All of the rules-based engine is for landing gear. However, we are already in discussions with a number of engine specialists, and we will be able to support engines shortly.
Well, the reason I'm asking is that, I don't know if our viewers know, but, a wide body landing gear, can be $1 million or something? I mean,
Oh, yeah, from a financial aspect, narrow bodies also can be millions of dollars. Right?
Okay. And so the problem that we're addressing right now is not, a $10 part, or $1,000 or $100,000 part. It can actually be $1 million part. And so, I want to talk a little bit about the value and how it's being impacted as we go into discussing this. So as we're looking at the industry and we're saying, what can people do to impact, the industry? And what you're doing right now sounds to be, a very significant impact to the industry. Now, if you're able to find problems with the gear, if you're able to find problems with the records for the gear, all right, does that impact the value of the asset? Does it go up? Does it go down? Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. So it can, number one of our airline customers had shared with us some data that they'd said that they are probably spending between $70,000 and $100,000 extra every time they go to overhaul gear, because the shop will find parts on that landing gear that they can't prove the full back purchase. So there's number one, cost savings for them. Could this finding the gaps in the paperwork at a time actually be a bonus? Yes, because if you can show your customer, hey, here's a report, this serial number has been transposed from the second operator 15 years ago, but I've got a picture of the data plate and I'm going to write a note saying that's the real serial number, that was just a typo. Now you've actually saved the value of that gear. So it can go both ways.
So Jim, tell us how the application that you guys have developed does a better job of evaluating records than what humans do.
So the first thing is it's not a manual process, right? So the current process for evaluating back to birth trace is you print out 500 pages of paper, somebody takes over the conference room and a pot of coffee, and a human goes through every single page and every single number. Okay, that's just fraught with human error, and it takes a long time, right? What ProvenAir does is it takes those documents. Number one, we digitize them, and when I say digitize them, we make that data intelligent. right, as you were mentioning, we actually get the information off of those documents. We know this is a part number. We know this is a serial number. Once we have that information, right, then ProvenAir runs its rules to say, do I have a berth? Is it a valid berth? Do the serial numbers match? Is the date between overhauls less than 10 years? Is it less than? All of the rules that we've put together on Back to Berth Trace. And when it finds an issue, it calls out that exception. Everything is digital, and it does it on demand. So it generates these things dynamically. So when an analyst or a records person needs to look up a part, they simply can type the part in and see that timeline, any of the exceptions, and then they can go begin to fix it, right? And so that's really kind of the difference here, is that the system automates and digitizes a lot of that human manual process.
Yeah, and how accurate can it be? I mean, listen, I know that the bank can read my check that nobody can even write. I mean, how accurate can this be?
So nothing is 100% accurate, right? I mean, a check or a simple resume, those are very easy to do. What we're talking about are non-standard documents. And when I say non-standard documents, when we talk about an LLP sheet, so it's a life-limited part sheet that every operator produces at the end of its operation, there's no standard format for that.
Right.
Okay, a check is very standard, right? We know exactly where the routing number and the account number go. In fact, they have little symbols if you look at the bottom, so it's really easy for software to pick that up.
Yeah.
That's not the case, especially with a concept here we call non-incident statement. Now, all of a sudden, we're introducing human language in written text. So now you have to, in the machine learning and artificial intelligence world, we call that natural language processing, right? Now we've introduced another difficult thing to do. So what we've done to solve that problem is, first, when the documents are loaded into ProvenAir, we go through our artificial intelligence system where we first classify the documents. We know, is it an 8130? Is it a non-incident statement? Is it a movement traceability sheet? We know what it is. Then it goes through an OCR process, which is what we call optical character recognition. So Mark, that's what your bank is doing to read those numbers and that, okay? But what we do in our system, because we have to be perfect, our algorithm is set to say, hey, computer, are you 99.9% sure? If not, you don't know that's a B or an 8, a human. We have a human that actually looks at it and verifies the data. So then once it's verified, then it goes into our quality center. And it's at this point that an analyst on our team that is very familiar with records looks at it. So if in one instance, a part number, or let's say a serial number had a dash at the end, it was 1234-01 versus 123401, does that matter? The system isn't going to make that judgment call. Okay, it's telling you the facts. This has a dash. It may make a suggestion, merge these two serial numbers together, for instance, but it's up to an analyst to say, yes, I know that because Airbus put out a service letter that says, hey, you can disregard these. Okay, based on that, we're going to do it. And there's a number of other things, right? So we have not only implemented kind of artificial intelligence and OCR technology to digitize and make this usable data, but we also layer in humans to verify, and that's why our system, the quality can be what it is.
So it's really a combination of both is what it really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I presume that you can actually do that because of the significant value of these parts.
That's right. We've also built the system because we have a background. I spent the first 4 years of my time in aviation trying to buy and sell landing gear. And so what we're a unique software company in that we actually sold parts before, right? We actually have, we're not just software developers, right? So we have the subject matter expertise. That's really what makes us unique in that aspect.
So, Jim, what kind of problems do you see with incoming paperwork? I mean, just to give a general idea, that you're actually catching. What are the issues?
We see a lot of typos. We see just incorrect information. We see missing data. So some of the issues that we're finding are that ProvenAir cannot, a lot of times, if a operator had the plane for 2 years and then it was leased to another operator, if we cannot determine from any of the documentation from that second operator to say, let's say operator A had the plane from 22,000 cycles to 28,000 cycles, okay? And they put that on a non-incident statement that says, I operated this aircraft, including this landing gear and these engines, from 25,000 cycles to 28,000 cycles on these dates, and it's fine. Okay. If the next operator just says, I had this plane and now it's got 39,000 cycles and nothing's happened to it. We don't know for sure. Are we missing documentation? What happened between 28,000 and 39? Was it that? We don't know for sure. We can infer that, but you don't know for sure. Remember, the software is just going to look at the facts, right? So those are a lot of the things we're seeing is just missing data on some of these documents.
So Jim, should companies go back and look at paperwork, off maintenance schedule?
I would say yes, but I don't know if it's required, especially if the part is airworthy already. It's gone through engineering. They tested it. It's and it's flying. But I would say do it because it'll save you a lot of headache in the long run.
Have you been able to save money for people that are doing lease returns?
Absolutely. Because what will happen, our current lessor customers, what they do is when the operator, because the operators are typically in charge of maintenance activities, what will happen is, let's say they're doing a landing gear replacement, the operator will tell the lessor, hey, this has backward trace. The lessor will say, oh, let me review that because you're putting it on my aircraft. The lessor then will have ProvenAir kind of as a second set of eyes to go through that paperwork just to ensure and head off any issues they may have in the future, right? Because let's say they missed something, the operator returns that plane off lease, and now the lessor has an aircraft, and they cleared all of their exceptions or any penalties that they may have charged, and now they're trying to release it. Well, now that customer may catch something and say, I don't want to accept this, or I need a concession, right? And at that point, the lessor has to do something, either replace the part, fix it. It causes a bunch of headaches. So we're saving a bunch of time and money by reviewing this paperwork up front in that scenario.
Hey, Jim, I have kind of, a technology question. Really, what's your business model? Is this a software as a service, or what's the business model?
It will be software as a service, but right now we kind of call it services that leverage software, or some people will call it managed services.
Okay.
Because it is a version 1 system, so our back end interfaces aren't, a lot of people aren't as technical as our team, so it may be a little more difficult. But that is the future vision for the solution.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, how long has the product been out?
It's been out in its current version 1 release since the end of Q1 of this year.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. And so, Jim, is it as we're talking about recovery in aviation, you've clearly talked about ways in which you can reduce cost by evaluating the records, and we've talked about the impact to an asset. Can I ask you a question about, like, in the process of selling parts, how does that impact your ability to be able to, get additional revenue or increase the price, or how does having better records actually increase the sale price of the asset?
So the price of an asset is dictated by the market, right? Price is dictated by supply and demand. But what better records does is it is almost a binary, where it's either going to be a coffee table in my basement, right, if it doesn't have the records, or I can sell it. So that's number one. But number two, for folks that are in the supply chain that are supplying this material, what they're able to do is reduce their sales cycle, right? And the reason they're able to do that is because now when they present a landing gear, let's say to an airline, the airline still is going to review those records. But if they can present that material with the records easily followed with a ProvenAir packet, a cover page, a checklist that shows everything that's gone through, everything's organized, all the events are there, and they can just skim through it and see it, you can take a sales cycle from weeks to a matter of days. And that, we always say, remember, time is money. Well, that is a great example of that.
So you're definitely impacting throughput and cycle time, basically. I would imagine then that you're impacting your ability to have increased cash flow and cycle time, meaning you could get more parts out or get more parts sold in a shorter period of time than, I guess, is what you're telling me.
That's right. That's right. If you're a parts supplier, that is a huge benefit for you. But also remember, if you're an aftermarket parts supplier, you also have to evaluate, should you purchase that material? So when you're looking at an engine, you're going to evaluate the paperwork first.
Right.
So that you don't get stuck with something and go, oh man, I missed this whole paperwork on the hot section, and now what do I do, right? But if I can evaluate that paperwork very quickly, I may beat a competitor who's also evaluating it, wanting to purchase it, right? Because in the aftermarket, the money is made on the buy side, right? So they need a quick way to analyze it. Then now they can sell it easier because they've got a way to put it in front of their customers.
So Jim, if we were to look at all these things that you're doing right now, can you maybe size up for me what would be the biggest impact to the industry with the things that you're doing? I mean, we've talked about a lot of different things. What's the biggest impact?
The biggest impact to the industry, I think, is we start to digitize a lot of this historical maintenance information. Right now, there's a lot of initiatives in the industry around predictive analytics and all this stuff, where they're taking data right off the aircraft. That aircraft is generating gigabytes of data on every flight. Okay, well, that's only telling you the current state. What happened with that thing 20 years ago when it wasn't owned by this airline or this lessor, and it's changed hands? That's what we're doing, a cross-platform. It's Boeing, it's Airbus, it doesn't matter, right? A cross operator globally, right? We can start digitizing that information. Now, once you have that information, there's a lot of insights you can gain from that.
Yeah, so digitized, accurate records is kind of what you're saying the bottom line is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Hey, Jim, as we're actually nearing close to the end of our session here, we wanted to ask you, if you could, to Larry, maybe you just jump in and just take this final question about.
Yeah, I guess just like kind of a final wrap-up question. Jim, clearly you're a leader in this digital transformation space, and as a leader in that space, what advice do you have for people who are kind of struggling with digital transformation or struggling just to keep their company up and going?
Well, I think your advice now for those kind of folks is, it's difficult. Right. I mean, this is just a difficult time. And when people say unprecedented, it really is unprecedented. Right. And so what I would advise people to do is just be transparent. There's, no one is going to fault you for saying, really, you don't know all the right answers when you're running a aviation company in the middle of the worst global pandemic of all time and you don't know what to do? Wow, you must be terrible, right? No one's saying that. So just be transparent. I have a saying that, and I've shared this with all of our stakeholders and our team. And what I tell them is I say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you what I know. I'm going to tell you what I don't know. And if it's something I don't know, I will try to find out. And I will try to do the right thing. That doesn't mean it's going to be the right answer because, like I said, nobody really knows the right answer. And if we're wrong, then we'll go back and fix it. But we're going to do what we think is the right thing to do. And so that's my biggest piece of advice right now. If you're struggling to get through this, and then, I always end with the stay positive notes, and I have a ton of information on that. But that's what I would tell someone.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Hey, listen, we're running out of time, Jim. We have another interview coming up next. It's actually with a company here in the Seattle area called Aerostrat. It's a planning company. And so for those of you that are watching here, we'd invite you to stay on for the next discussion with Aerostrat. And they're actually doing aircraft planning. And so, please stay tuned for this. But as we wrap up this session, Jim, I want to thank you for taking time to explain to us what you're doing. And really, I really appreciate your commitment to the industry and your commitment to quality and safety, because what you're doing right now is, you're saving people a lot of money, and you're providing, a valuable tool, a valuable resource, but you're also interjecting safety, into the industry. And we want to continue to have a very safe industry that's safe and efficient, and people can feel like they can fly within this industry, and they can feel safe. And so I want to thank you for that. And Jim, as we wrap things up, I want to mention to people that if they went to our platform, they can go there at live.recoveryinaviation.com. And there they can click a button next to your name on the agenda. It says Jim Boccarossa, ProvenAir. And there's a button here that says Get More Info. And if they want to continue this conversation with you, they can click on that button, and it just prompts you for a person's name and an email. And then it gives them information about how to get in touch with you, or we're going to forward those leads to you, and then you'll be able to reach out to people that would like to continue this conversation with you. Jim, very knowledgeable. We really appreciate the information that you have, and we wish you the best in this business. And we appreciate your insight coming in from outside of the industry and being able to interject some of that knowledge into the aviation industry. I really do think that's valuable. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate all the work you do for kind of promoting this theme and keeping everything positive, because you see so much negativity out there. So I know how much work it is to do this, and so we think you're just doing excellent work. Keep it up. Stay positive. That's a big theme within our company. So
yeah, good. Good. Yeah, I'm just going to wrap it up real quick by telling everybody that we have 62 speakers, and we know that everybody's not going to watch all of them, and we record these videos, and they're only available on this platform the day that it's actually being broadcast live. And then what we do is we take the recordings and we put them into a portal or onto a website, and we make them available to people so they can go watch the recording. But in order to have them and be able to maintain them, we charge a nominal fee for that. And so actually on the website, there's a button that says upgrade to the all access pass now. And if you'd like to have access to the videos and actually speaker notes and things like that, it's all going to be available on that website. So you might want to check that out and see if that's something that you're interested in. Jim, thank you for joining us. And we're going to sign off now as we get ready to go to our next interview.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye.
Fun discussion.
See you guys.
Yeah, thanks.